If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting content like this. Now let's dive into this intense journey of family betrayal and triumph. The reflection in the mirror looked like it belonged to a stranger. Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery ran her trembling fingers over her exposed scalp, feeling the small wounds where the clippers had pressed too hard. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of self-pity. They were fueled by a growing rage, an emotion she had never experienced with such intensity before. "Oh my God, what have they done to me?" she whispered to herself. The luxurious hotel room that should have been a sanctuary of peace on the eve of what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life now felt like a crime scene. Strands of her auburn hair, which just hours earlier cascaded in soft waves down her back, lay scattered on the floor like silent evidence of an unimaginable violation. The night before, Sarah had sipped a cup of tea prepared by her mother, Margaret. "To calm those pre-wedding nerves," she had said with a smile that Sarah now recognized as insincere. The slight bitterness Sarah had attributed to the special honey her mother always used was, in fact, crushed lorazepam, a powerful sedative that left her conscious but unable to move a muscle to defend herself. Memories came back in disorienting flashes, her younger sister, Melissa's voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "Cut her hair or you'll lose me forever." Margaret's momentary hesitation, the heavy sound of her father, Charles Montgomery's footsteps, bringing in the professional clipper, and then that unknown male laughter echoing from somewhere in the room, a laugh that didn't belong to her father, adding an even more disturbing layer to the betrayal. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the memories, but they kept flooding back. The buzzing of the clippers, the first curl falling over her shoulder, the absolute helplessness as she watched in the mirror her own mother transform her reflection into something unrecognizable, lock by lock, with an almost clinical determination. "Sarah? Are you in there?" Jessica, her wedding planner, knocked softly at the door, pulling Sarah back to the present, the day of her wedding. "1 minute," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she expected. She took a deep breath and decided this wouldn't be the day her family completely broke her. Not after 32 years of accepting being the second choice. The daughter whose achievements in marketing school and shining career in Atlanta were only worthy of polite nods, while Melissa's repeated failures were treated as mere temporary setbacks, deserving of unconditional support and unlimited funding. Sarah opened the door, and Jessica's expression instantly changed from excited anticipation to shock and horror. "Oh my God, Sarah, what happened to you?" Jessica quickly entered the room, shutting the door behind her. "My family happened," Sarah replied with surprising calm, even to herself. "And today I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they really are." Jessica listened in stunned silence as Sarah recounted the events of the previous night. When she finished, Jessica held her hands tightly. "Are you sure? About what they did? I mean, this is criminal." "I am," Sarah replied, pointing to her phone, "and I have more than just my word." At that exact moment, a gentle knock sounded at the door. Jessica opened it cautiously, revealing Aunt Ruth, the only member of the Montgomery family who had ever treated Sarah with genuine kindness. At 65, Ruth Montgomery carried an elegance that didn't come from her expensive clothes or jewelry, but from an inner dignity that even her brother Charles couldn't intimidate. "Oh, my dear," Ruth whispered upon seeing Sarah, her eyes filling with tears, but she quickly composed herself, closing the door and placing her purse on the bed. "I brought something you need to see." Ruth pulled out a small USB drive from her pocket. "I spent all night downloading and analyzing the footage from the front door security camera. It doesn't show what they did to you, but it captured all the audio, including the pre-planning conversation between your parents and Melissa." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "They planned this? It wasn't just a sick impulse from Melissa." Ruth shook her head slowly. "Melissa is in serious financial trouble. Apparently her gambling debts are much worse than we imagined. Your parents were threatening to cut her off financially if she didn't get her life together before your wedding. I guess in her twisted mind, ruining your big day was a way to ensure she remained the center of attention. And funding. And my parents just went along with it," Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "Your father hesitated," Ruth admitted. "But your mother, She said something you need to hear for yourself. As Ruth connected the USB to Sarah's laptop, Jessica grabbed her phone. I'm going to call David. He needs to know what's going on. David Chen. Sarah's fiancé was the CFO of a tech company in Atlanta. They had met at a marketing conference 5 years ago when Sarah was still settling into the city. What began as a professional friendship blossomed into a solid love, built on mutual respect and understanding. Sarah had always admired how David valued her independence and professional achievements, something her own family had never done. No, Sarah interrupted Jessica. I want to talk to him in person. I just need to gather my thoughts first. Ruth nodded understandingly and clicked on the audio file. Familiar voices filled the room. She's always had everything handed to her. Melissa's voice echoed, bitter and resentful. The perfect career, the perfect fiancé, and now the perfect wedding that everyone will talk about for years. Meanwhile, look at me. 30 years old and nothing to show for it. Sweetheart, that's not fair, Charles's tired voice tried to argue. Sarah has worked hard for what she has. A noise of something hitting the table. Charles, don't start, Margaret's sharp voice intervened. You know as well as I do that Sarah has always been different, always wanting to stand out, to get out of Magnolia Springs as if we were beneath her. This glamorous wedding is just another way for her to show off. So you're going to let her do this? Let her humiliate me once again? Melissa whined. A long pause. Then Margaret's voice, low and determined. What do you want us to do, Melissa? I want her to feel what it's like to lose something important. Cut her hair or you'll lose me forever. I'm serious, Mom. Choose now who is more important to you. The silence that followed was more painful than any verbal response could be. Finally, Charles's defeated voice, I'll go get the clippers from the car. Sarah turned off the audio, unable to listen any longer. The room was silent for several seconds until Ruth spoke softly. There's more after. After they were done, there's a male voice I couldn't identify. Someone was there watching besides your parents and Melissa. Michael, Sarah whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. Michael Palmer, Melissa's ex-boyfriend whom she never fully got over. He always had a strange obsession with my hair. Jessica looked confused. Why would he be there? Because he's a photographer, Sarah replied, a new kind of horror creeping onto her face. And I bet Melissa wanted him to document everything. David Chen arrived at the hotel less than 40 minutes after Jessica's call. When he entered the room and saw Sarah, his normally composed face went through a series of emotions. Shock, confusion, pain, and finally a controlled anger that Sarah had never seen before. Who did this to you? He asked, his voice trembling slightly as he stepped closer to gently touch her face. When Sarah finished explaining, with Ruth occasionally adding details, David remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he knelt in front of Sarah, holding her hands. Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery, I fell in love with you not because of your hair or looks. I fell in love with your strength, your intelligence, your kindness. Nothing your family did changes that. If you want to call off the wedding, I'll completely understand. If you want to go ahead with it, I'll be by your side. What do you want to do? Sarah felt a wave of gratitude so intense, it nearly overwhelmed her. In her 32 years of life, few people had ever asked her what she wanted. I want to marry you today just as we planned, she replied firmly. But I also want everyone to see who my family really is. David nodded, his expression resolute. Then that's what we'll do. At that moment, another knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Jessica opened it cautiously, revealing Margaret and Charles Montgomery, both impeccably dressed for the wedding. Sarah, dear, we need to talk about... Oh, Margaret stopped abruptly upon seeing David in the room. David, what a surprise. You know it's tradition for the groom not to see the bride before the ceremony. The falseness in her mother's voice made Sarah's stomach churn. Charles remained a step behind, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. Tradition? Sarah repeated, slowly rising. Like the tradition of drugging your daughter and cutting all her hair the night before her wedding. Margaret paled but quickly regained her composure. Sarah, don't be dramatic. It was just a little adjustment. We brought a lovely wig that will match your dress perfectly. No one needs to know. No one needs to know, Sarah echoed incredulously. That's what you want, isn't it? To save face at all costs. Charles finally spoke, his voice low. Sarah, try to understand. Your sister is going through a tough time. She needs support, not judgment. And what about me? Sarah asked, her voice breaking for the first time. What did I need when you drugged me and violated me like this? Margaret frowned, visibly irritated with Sarah's choice of words. Violated? Please, Sarah, always so melodramatic. It was just hair, it will grow back. Melissa is dealing with much bigger problems. She lost everything at the tables. She's completely dependent on us now. Sarah looked at her parents with a clarity she had never had before. She saw how Margaret, in her impeccable Chanel suit and perfectly matched pearls, was more concerned with what the Magnolia Springs community would think than with the trauma she inflicted on her own daughter. She saw how Charles, who had always prided himself on being a respectable man, was willing to compromise any moral principle to maintain family peace, as long as that peace favored Melissa. Did you bring the wig? Sarah asked calmly. Margaret seemed relieved by what she interpreted as acceptance. Yes, dear. Hey, it's beautiful. Made from the best natural hair. No one will notice the difference. Show me, Sarah demanded. Charles quickly opened a stylish box he was carrying, revealing a wig of auburn hair, almost identical to the natural hair Sarah had until the night before. Sarah picked up the wig, examining it closely. Then deliberately she tossed it into the room's trash can. I'm not wearing this. I'm going to marry just as I am, Margaret gasped, horrified. Sarah, you can't be serious. What will people think? What will they say? They will say the truth, Sarah replied firmly, that my own family betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. And you know what? I don't care anymore what people think. I've been trying to earn your approval for 32 years, and today I finally realized I never will. Charles stepped forward, his expression pleading. Daughter, think about what you're doing. Think about family. I'm thinking about my new family, Sarah replied, holding David's hand. The one I'm starting today, with someone who truly values me for who I am. As her parents left the room, clearly shaken by Sarah's refusal to yield, Aunt Ruth smiled proudly at her niece. You know they'll try to stop you in any way they can, right? Ruth commented, pulling out her phone. Margaret would never allow a public scandal of this magnitude. Sarah nodded. That's why we need a plan. David was already a step ahead. My cousin's son works as an AV technician at the venue where the reception will be. Tommy Chen. He can help us ensure the evidence is presented without interference, Ruth quickly typed on her phone. Tommy was my student in high school. I'll reach out to him immediately. As Ruth made the call, Sarah opened her laptop again, determined to gather all possible evidence. With Jessica's help, she began to compile. The lorazepam bottle, Sarah listed. It's in my bag. It has Melissa's name on the prescription, but I bet we'll find the payment on my father's credit card. Jessica nodded, typing. I'll check the statements online you showed me earlier. The clippers, Sarah continued. My dad probably took them back home, but there should be a receipt. David, who was on the phone with his bank, hung up with a triumphant expression. Found it? Charles Montgomery bought a professional hair clipper yesterday afternoon at Mastercut's barbershop downtown. I have access to your transaction network because you authorized me as a co-holder when we were planning our joint finances. And there's the audio, Ruth added, finishing her call with Tommy. He's waiting for us at the venue now. He says he can set everything up so that no one can interfere with the sound system during the presentation. Sarah felt a pang of pain thinking about the 200 guests who would be present, friends, co-workers, distant relatives, people who came to celebrate love, not witness the unmasking of a seemingly perfect family. Are you sure about this, Sarah? Jessica gently asked, reading her expression. You don't have to expose them today. We could handle this privately. Sarah looked in the mirror once more, seeing her transformed reflection. She remembered all the times her parents minimized her achievements while overly celebrating every little effort from Melissa. She remembered how even when she was accepted with a full scholarship to one of the best universities in the country, her parents barely attended her graduation because Melissa had a piano recital the same weekend, a hobby she abandoned 2 weeks later. They chose to do this publicly, Sarah finally replied. They chose to do this on the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. For 32 years I've been the sacrificial daughter, the one who understands, who forgives. Not anymore. As the group finished their preparations, a hesitant knock sounded at the door. Jessica opened it, revealing Pastor Williams, a kind man who had known Sarah since childhood and was scheduled to officiate the ceremony. "Sarah?" he called, clearly shocked to see her state. "Your mother just reached out to me, saying you weren't feeling well and that the wedding might be postponed. But I see that there's much more going on here." Sarah invited the pastor in and with surprising calm recounted the events of the previous night. When she finished, Pastor Williams was visibly shaken. "I've known your parents for over 20 years, he said slowly. "I never imagined—" "But your eyes don't lie, Sarah. Neither does this evidence." He gestured to the laptop where the audio had been played. "Do you still want to get married today?" he finally asked. Sarah looked at David, who nodded in silent support. "Yes, I do. This is our day, not theirs. I won't let them take that away from me, too." Pastor Williams solemnly nodded. "Then I'll be there to celebrate your union. And Sarah, I want you to know that what you're going through this trial, sometimes the most broken people become the strongest warriors." The stone church that had witnessed generations of Montgomery weddings was decorated with white lilies and peach roses, Sarah's favorite flowers. The afternoon Saturday sun filtered through the stained glass, creating vibrant patterns that danced down the aisle. Backstage, Sarah watched as guests entered and were ushered to their seats. She saw her co-workers from Atlanta, friends from college, and her parents' extensive social network, the elite of Magnolia Springs. People who knew the Montgomerys as community pillars, church leaders, and respected members of the Homeowners Association. "Are you ready?" Jessica asked, adjusting Sarah's dress one last time. The dress, a Vera Wang design Sarah had chosen months earlier, was a dream of satin and lace. The traditional veil had been replaced with a shorter, sheer version that, instead of hiding, framed her face and highlighted her shaved head in an almost ethereal way. "I've never been more ready in my life," Sarah replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. As she awaited the signal to enter, Sarah saw Melissa approaching down the side aisle. Her sister wore an emerald green dress, her favorite color, not coincidentally the only one that didn't match the wedding color scheme. Her eyes were red, but Sarah couldn't determine if from crying or something more. "Are you really going to do this?" Melissa asked, her voice a mix of challenge and disbelief. "Show up like this in front of everyone? Why wouldn't I?" Sarah retorted calmly. "You certainly went to great lengths to leave me like this." Melissa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You've always had it easy, Sarah. The perfect looks, the perfect grades, the perfect career. And now David? Did you know he and I had a moment before you came along?" Sarah studied her sister closely, recognizing the desperate tactic. "No, Melissa. He told me about when you tried to seduce him at the engagement party, and how he politely turned down your advances." Melissa's expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly composed herself. "He's lying. Ask yourself why he's so eager to marry you even after this." She gestured to Sarah's head. "Because he loves me for who I am," Sarah replied simply. "A concept that you and our parents will never understand." Before Melissa could respond, the first notes of the wedding march began to play, and Jessica quickly guided Sarah away. "It's time, Sarah," she whispered, handing her the bouquet of lilies and roses. Charles Montgomery appeared, wearing his impeccable tuxedo, a tense expression on his face. "Sarah, please wear the wig. This is your last chance." Sarah looked at her father, really looked at him, and saw not the strong man she had idolized in childhood, but someone weak, controlled by fear of what others would think. "No," she simply replied. "And you have two options now, Dad. You can walk me down the aisle with pride, or you can join Mom and Melissa in the pews, and I will walk alone." For a long moment, Charles seemed torn. Then slowly he offered his arm. "Let's go then." As the church doors opened fully and Sarah appeared at the entrance, a collective murmur swept through the congregation. She saw the looks of shock, heard the confused whispers, noted some expressions of horror, mostly from her mother's close friends. But then she saw something else, David, waiting at the altar, looking at her not with pity or embarrassment, but with genuine admiration and love. She saw Aunt Ruth in the front row, smiling through her tears. She saw Pastor Williams waving encouragingly, and in that moment, Sarah realized that what should have been her ultimate humiliation had transformed into something entirely different. Every step she took down the aisle was not out of shame, but of liberation. The sun through the stained glass seemed to follow her progress, illuminating her with vibrant colors that danced on her exposed skin, creating an almost mythical vision. The whispers continued, but Sarah no longer heard them. She focused only on David, on her future, on the man who loved her completely, hair or not. When she reached the altar and Charles handed her hand to David, she saw in her fiancé's eyes everything she needed: total acceptance, deep admiration, and a love that transcended any superficial notion of beauty. "You look absolutely stunning," he whispered as they turned to Pastor Williams. And for the first time that tumultuous day, Sarah smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her entire being. The ceremony unfolded with a solemn beauty that dramatically contrasted the emotional chaos of the previous hours. When Pastor Williams declared them husband and wife, and David gently lifted the sheer veil to kiss his bride, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Walking out of the church as Mrs. Sarah Chen, she caught a glimpse of her mother and Melissa, sitting rigidly in the front pews, tense expressions as they clapped mechanically. Margaret had maintained her social composure, but her eyes revealed a contained fury that Sarah knew well. The reception would be held at the elegant Magnolia Springs Country Club, a venue the Montgomerys had frequented for generations. As guests made their way there, Sarah, David, Aunt Ruth, and Jessica made a quick stop to check in with Tommy Chen to ensure everything was prepared. "All set, Mrs. Chen," Tommy confirmed with a respectful smile. "The system is set up to show the audio and footage exactly when you give the signal, and I took the liberty of protecting the system with a password only I know, so no one can interfere." Sarah thanked him, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. What she was about to do would forever change not just her relationship with her family, but also how the entire community viewed them. "Are you sure about this?" David asked quietly, holding her hand. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," Sarah replied. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this to free myself, and maybe to prevent them from doing the same to someone else." When they entered the lavishly decorated banquet hall, they were greeted with applause. The atmosphere was celebratory, with none of the guests, except for the closest to the couple, having any idea of the drama unfolding behind the smiles and greetings. Margaret Montgomery had strategically positioned herself close to the main table, discreetly intercepting anyone who seemed about to make a comment about Sarah's appearance. "A show of solidarity with children battling cancer," Sarah heard her murmur to a close friend. "So brave, our Sarah." The irony was almost too painful to bear. After dinner, it was time for the traditional speeches. Charles Montgomery stood up first, holding his champagne glass with a slightly trembling hand. "When my daughter Sarah was born," he began, his voice carrying a false joviality, "I knew right away she would be special. Determined, independent, always following her own path. Today, seeing her unite her life with David, I feel a pride that words cannot express." Sarah watched her father craft a completely fictional narrative of paternal support and pride, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. When he finished, to polite applause, Sarah exchanged a meaningful glance with Tommy, who nodded discreetly. It was her turn. Sarah stood up, and the hall gradually fell silent. All eyes were on her elegant dress and shaved head, an image of contrast that intrigued and confused. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Seeing so many beloved faces gathered to celebrate our love means more to me than I can express." She paused, her eyes meeting Margaret's, who was staring at her with a silent warning expression. "Many of you seem surprised by my appearance today. Some gently presumed it was a gesture of solidarity. Others might have thought it was a bold style choice. The truth, however, is much different." A murmur swept through the hall. Margaret made a move as if to get up, but Charles placed a hand on her arm, keeping her in place. "Last night," Sarah continued, "I experienced something that fundamentally changed my understanding of family, love, and self-acceptance. And before I share this experience with you, I want to say that I'm not doing this for revenge or to embarrass anyone. I'm doing this because for my entire life, I've been part of a system that valued appearances over truth, and today I choose to break that cycle." Sarah gestured to Tommy, who pressed a button. The lights dimmed slightly, and a screen descended behind the main table. Images of the lorazepam bottle with Melissa's name, the receipt for the hair clippers purchased by Charles, and photos of Sarah's hair strands found in the trash appeared on the screen. "Last night, I was drugged with a powerful sedative placed in my tea by my own mother. While I was unable to defend myself, my parents and sister did this to me." The silence in the hall was absolute. Then the audio began to play. Familiar voices of Melissa making her ultimatum, Margaret agreeing, and Charles conceding. "Cut her hair or you'll lose me forever." Melissa's voice echoed through the hall, followed by Margaret's fatalistic response. "What do you want us to do, Melissa?" When the audio ended, the silence that followed was almost tangible. Sarah saw horrified faces, expressions of disbelief, some people crying silently. Margaret was as pale as paper. Melissa had lowered her head. And Charles appeared to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "For 32 years, Sarah continued, her voice now softer, "I tried to be the daughter my parents wanted. I studied tirelessly, built a solid career, found a wonderful man. But it was never enough because in our family, there was always a golden daughter and it wasn't me." Sarah looked directly at her parents, who remained frozen in their seats. "What you did to me was not just a violation of my body. It was the culmination of a lifetime of messages that my feelings, my achievements, and my happiness were secondary. Today I end that cycle, not as a victim but as a survivor." She turned to David, who stood and held her hand in silent support. "Today I start a new family with a man who truly values me. And I promise here in front of all of you that any child we have will never know favoritism, manipulation, or abuse that I experienced. Our home will be built on genuine love, not appearances." The silence was broken by Aunt Ruth, who began to applaud. Slowly, others joined her. First Jessica, then Sarah's friends from Atlanta, and soon almost all the guests were standing, applauding not just in support, but in admiration for the courage they were witnessing. Margaret finally stood, trying to maintain dignity as she quickly made her way to the nearest exit. Charles hesitated, looking at Sarah with a complex expression that mixed shame, regret, and something that could be interpreted as a tenuous respect. Then slowly he too left, following his wife. Melissa remained seated alone, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. As the applause faded, Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time since she started her speech. "Thank you for witnessing not just our union today, but also my rebirth. Now, if you'll allow me, I would like to dance with my husband." The music started, and David led Sarah to the dance floor. As they danced, he held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm better than I've ever been in my life," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. Around them, guests began to join the dance floor, many stopping to express admiration and support. The reception continued, transformed from a meticulously planned social event into a genuine celebration of truth and authenticity. Later, as Sarah and David were about to leave for their honeymoon, Aunt Ruth approached, embracing her niece tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "You didn't just survive. You transcended." "I couldn't have done it without you," Sarah replied, holding her aunt's hands. "Oh dear," Ruth smiled wisely. "You always had that strength within you. You just needed to find it." As the car decorated with flowers and ribbons pulled away, taking the newlyweds away, Sarah looked out the window at the brightly lit banquet hall, where her old life had ended and the new had begun. The night sky was filled with stars, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt completely at peace with who she was. Her family's betrayal had been meant to break her, but instead, it had set her free. As the car sped down the road, leaving Magnolia Springs behind, she turned to David. "Do you know what's the strangest thing? I feel grateful." "Grateful?" he asked, surprised. "Yes," she replied, touching her scalp with a newfound acceptance. "They thought they were taking something important from me, but they actually gave me something far more valuable, the freedom to finally be who I truly am." David smiled, squeezing her hand. "And who are you, Sarah Chen?" She smiled back, feeling light and whole. "Someone who finally understood that the most broken people can truly become the strongest warriors. The car continued down the dark road, taking them toward their future, a future that Sarah finally felt was truly hers. If you enjoyed this thrilling story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. Your comments mean a lot to me, so please share your thoughts on this journey of overcoming and rebirth. Thank you for joining me in this narrative.